to my Disneyland Paris travel planning video. Now this is an updated version of a previous video, so what you will see is a previous video but with new bits added based on new stuff that I have tried. So, how do you get to Disneyland Paris from the UK? There are various ways that you can travel. So you can drive, and when you drive you have two options. You could go by the shuttle or you could go by the ferry. You could fly, and you can get the Eurostar, and when you get the Eurostar you've got a choice of the direct Eurostar to Disneyland Paris, the Eurostar to Paris, or you have the Eurostar via Lille. I'm going to look at all of these options for you and just talk a little bit about my experiences. Now obviously these are based on the experiences that I have had doing these journeys. Doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to have the same experiences, but I'm just offering you my opinion based on what I have experienced, so it will hopefully help you decide the best way for you to travel to Disneyland Paris. So when I first did this video, I hadn't driven to Disneyland Paris in about 20 years, although my parents did when we went at Christmas. So I am going to be talking now about the experiences that I've had recently when I've driven to Disneyland Paris. So the first thing you need to bear in mind is there are two ways that you can drive. You can either get the Eurotunnel, the shuttle, from Folkestone, or you can get a ferry from Dover. They are quite close together, but they are two separate places, but you do end up in Calais in both instances. From Calais to Disneyland Paris, it is 314 kilometres, which is 195 miles. This takes roughly 3 hours and 20 minutes to drive. It is motorway most of the way, and it is tolls. Currently it's €21 and I think 60 cents to pay. But the benefit of going on the toll roads is, in France the toll roads are relatively clear because a lot of people avoid them because they don't want to have to pay the tolls. So if you're thinking about driving to Disneyland Paris, you need to factor in around 3 hours and 20 minutes to get from Calais to Disneyland Paris, and then obviously however long it's going to get you from where you're starting off to either Folkestone or Dover. Another thing to consider about driving is there are certain things that you need to have in your car when driving in France. You have to have a high-vis jacket for every person in the car. You have to have a breathalyzer kit. Now this currently isn't law, but they're still saying that you need to have one even though it's not legally enforceable, so it's a good idea to have one. You need to have a GB sticker on the back of your car or magnet, and you need to have the lights done for your beam headlights to make sure that they go the right way. All of these can be bought online, and some places like Halfords or the AA or the RAC do actually provide full packs so that you can buy it all in one go, so you don't have to worry about buying all of the different bits separately. You can just go onto their websites, they'll tell you about the legislation, and they will sell you everything that you need to have in the car. Once you've got everything in the car, then you're ready to go. Going by tunnel, you get there, I think you have to be there at least 30 minutes before, and you need to go through immigration and customs, so you will go through English border control and then you will go through French border control at the same time. It's just a series of checkpoints where you have to hand over your passports. They'll check your passports and then they'll send you off on your way. They might ask you to go through a weigh centre, or they might ask you to take everything out of the car if you look suspicious enough. As long as you haven't got anything you shouldn't have, then you have nothing to worry about. They'll line you up, so once you arrive you'll get given a number or a letter, and then you can drive through and you can go into the restaurants. There's a sort of like a shopping centre with shops and restaurants where you can get breakfast or whatever meal you want to get while you're waiting. They'll then have screens that show which numbers are departing at which time. When it's time for your number, then you get in the car, you drive around to the loading area, and there are rows for each letter. So based on your letter you just follow the signs and you drive down and you get in the right row, and then they'll come along and they'll tell you your row to go and they will direct you onto the train. You could get on at various points along the train. They don't just fill it from the back to the front and make you drive all the way along, they do fill it in sections. And if you're in a car, you could be either on the lower deck or you could be on the top deck. There is an upper deck as well. They do have a double-decker stacker for cars. Obviously if you've got a high vehicle, a van or a roof rack, then they will put you in the single level with coaches and stuff. Now the advantages of the train are that they are more regular than the ferry, so they tend to depart about every half an hour, and if you're early enough you might get bumped onto an earlier shuttle, or if you're late then you're not necessarily going to have to wait too long for another shuttle to come along. They're fairly flexible with their departure times. I will say, however, that both journeys going out and back, when we went on the tunnel, we were delayed significantly by over an hour, I think, both directions. So that is just something to bear in mind, that you do need to be a little bit flexible with your time when driving, because obviously you could have delays in the tunnel, you could have delays on the ferry, and you could have delays on the roads as well. Journey time on the tunnel is 30 minutes. Which is really good on the way back, because you actually arrive back home 30 minutes before you left France. It's quick, you stay in your car. It can be quite hot, you have to turn the engine off, so you can't have aircon or music or anything on in the car. It's quite cramped, but it's quick, so you don't really notice it. There are toilets on board, but they are train toilets, so that's something to consider. And it's relatively easy. With the ferry, it is cheaper than the tunnel quite often. It is an hour and 30 minutes by the ferry. It works the same way as the tunnel. You go through the kiosks, you go through customs, and you get given a number. You then follow the signs around to the lane with your number, and you have all of the lanes with all of the numbers above the top of them, and you just drive into the lane with a number that matches the one that's on your car, and you have to hang that. With the ferry, there is less amenities compared to the tunnel. There isn't a shopping centre or anything. They do have sort of vending machine, coffee machines and toilets in the waiting area, but there's no sort of central like shopping centre area, duty free area, because you get all of that once you get onto the ferry, so there's less need for it before you get on your journey. When they start filling, they'll then start filling different rows into the ferry. You could have to go up onto a high deck, or you could just go up onto a lower deck. You're still going to have to drive up and in. And then inside the ferry, unlike the tunnel, which is one long line, there are rows inside the ferry, and they will put everybody in, and then they'll do the same thing to get everybody off as well. They'll take people off in rows, and they'll tell you exactly which way to go. The advantage is though that you're not allowed to stay in your car. You have to go up onto the deck. There are shops, there's restaurants, and you can go out on deck and get completely windswept as well. The one thing I really liked about the ferry was when we left really early in the morning, it allowed us to get out of the car, stretch our legs and have a nice big breakfast before we then got back in the car and started our journey off. One thing you do need to be wary of, which we fell afoul, is that halfway between France and England your phone will try and connect to a maritime network, which if you don't have free roaming or unlimited roaming, or your phone is set to be locked so that it won't automatically connect to a foreign network, your phone could connect to this foreign network and you'll end up getting charged, and it's a really expensive network because it's a maritime network. So if you don't have a contract where your phone won't let you use roaming unless you've signed up for it, then I would put your phone into aeroplane mode when you get on the ferry, and then switch it back on again when you get into France, so that you can use the French networks if that was what you've paid for, or leave it off because you don't want to use your 3G or your 4G in France. The ferries are less regular than the tunnel, so you could have a longer wait. We got to the ferry port about just short of 2 hours before our ferry, and if we'd have been going to the Eurotunnel we probably would have got bumped to an earlier tunnel, but unfortunately there were no earlier ferries. We'd missed the one before by about 10 minutes, so we would have to have been about an hour earlier than we were to get the one before. I preferred the tunnel in terms of time because it was quicker, obviously, but if the ferry is cheaper, there's no downside really to getting the ferry. Once you get off either the tunnel or the ferry, it is fairly straightforward to get from Calais to Disneyland Paris. It's 3 motorways in essentially a U shape on its side. You drive in towards Paris, down around the outside, and then back out to Disneyland Paris. So it's relatively easy. The worst bit you might find is around the Charles de Gaulle airport, because the traffic tends to clog up around the airport. And when we went in June we actually got diverted because the motorway that ran between the 2 motorways we wanted was actually shut. So we ended up going the scenic route. Now for me, I live about 15 minutes from Heathrow Airport, so it's a no-brainer to drive to the airport, and 15 minutes after leaving the house I'm at the airport. From that time on it takes about 4 hours to get to Disneyland Paris, and then of course obviously you have to add in the hour time difference. So if I get to the airport at 5 o'clock then I will be in Disneyland Paris for about 10 o'clock in the morning. For me this is perfect because it allows me to do long weekends, or even just weekends where I fly on a Saturday and fly back on a Sunday, because I arrive at 10 o'clock in the morning, so I've still pretty much got the whole day ahead of me. It's also cheaper than getting the Eurostar. So I tend to fly Air France. I have flown British Airways, but I've been flying Air France more recently just because of the convenience. First of all, their early morning flights are earlier than British Airways, and also they fly into Terminal 2E, which is the sort of central part of Terminal 2, which is close to the Magical Shuttle transfer bus, the taxi rank, and it's also fairly close to the station as well. Terminal 2A, where I ended up when I flew with British Airways, is right at the end, and you have to walk through all the other terminals to get to the train station or the bus station, so it is quite a long hike. Now I tend to fly hand luggage only, and one of the main reasons for that is that I can get off the plane and through passport control fairly quickly, because I need to get to the station fairly quickly. So once you arrive in Charles de Gaulle Airport, you will go through to the immigration area, and I've waited anywhere from 45 minutes to 10 minutes. Just really does depend on, well, I don't know really, because most days I arrive it's a Saturday morning and I can never tell from one Saturday to the other whether there's going to be a massive queue or not. Once you get through the passport control, you then go down into the baggage reclaim, and you can wait up to 45 minutes for a bag. As you walk past the baggage carousels, it just does tell you an expected time for the bags, and I noticed that for my flight last time it was going to be a 45-minute wait until the bags were offloaded. So that's something to bear in mind when you're considering packing luggage. Once you've gone through the baggage claim, you've got customs, which you just walk straight through, and you are out into a mass of people where there's lots of people waiting. If you come out of Terminal 2E, as you come straight out, you go straight ahead and across, and it will take you down to where the Magical Shuttle is. Now the Magical Shuttle is a coach service. It's not operated by Disney, it's not the Magical Express like it is in Orlando, but it is run in conjunction with Disney, specifically to take people from the airport to Disneyland Paris hotels. They run about once every 45 minutes, but it can be a bit touch or go. I just missed one on my first trip, and I had to wait about an hour and 15 minutes for the next bus to go. It only takes about 45 minutes, so it can take a while, especially if you've already had to wait 45 minutes to an hour for a bus. So you need to factor this in, but you can take your bag and they do put it on the bus. They will ask you where you're travelling to, so if you're going to a hotel then obviously you give them the name of the hotel, and they can also drop you at the station, which is the main gates for the park. So if you want to go straight to the park and drop your bag at the concierge, you can do that as well. Depending on how busy they are and how many people are on the bus and where everybody is going to, they might drop more people at the station. Sometimes they do drop people at the sister hotels, so the Kyriad, the Explorers, the Dream Castle, the Circus and the B&B. But I have also been on trips where people who have been on in those hotels have had to get off at the station and connect to the hotel buses. So it's really going to depend on when you go as to whether you can get direct to your hotel or not. If you want to go to the park and the bus is quite busy, I would recommend that you get off at the first hotel, the first Disney hotel you stop at, which quite often is the Newport Bay Club, and just walk round. It's much quicker getting off the Magical Shuttle at the first Disney hotel and either getting on the Disney shuttles to the train station there or walking will be quicker. The buses are clean and comfortable. I think they have air conditioning. Most of them say they have free Wi-Fi, but I've never been on one that has had Wi-Fi. And I've also been on them when they've had cartoons, Disney cartoons showing as well. So in terms of journey, it's fairly stress-free. You just go down to the magical shuttle desk. You can pay in advance on the website, or you can pay on the day when you get to the airport, and they will just tell you where to go for the next available bus. Another way which you can travel from the airport is by the TGV. Now, I've been doing this a lot recently because I found this is actually the most efficient way to get to Disneyland Paris from the airport. However, this is just because of the times in the morning that my flights arrive. The TGV is very sporadic, and you can have a couple of hours where you might have 3 or 4 trains in the 2 hours, and then you might go 2 or 3 hours without any trains at all. There are no regular train services specifically for Disneyland Paris. So for me, as long as my flights are on time, if I get the 6:20 flight, Air France flight, I will absolutely definitely get on the 9:58 TGV train. If I get the 6:40, I will definitely get on the 10:16 TGV train. The main advantage to the TGV is it takes about 7 minutes to get from the airport to the station in Mont-la-Vallée where Disneyland Paris is. So it is a really, really good, quick way to get there. It can seem a little bit complicated to start with. The best thing to do is to go on Voyage SNCF website, pay, and it's normally between 10 and 20 euros depending on the time of year that you're going and how far in advance you book. You can book 3 months in advance. That's as far as you can book, and the further out you book, the cheaper it is. The closer you get to the time, the more expensive it is. When you book that, you get a reservation number which you just need to take with you when you go to the airport, and then you go to one of the yellow ticket machines, put in your code, and then your ticket will be given to you. Follow the screens at the airport which will show you your train time and your train number, which will be printed on your ticket, and then you will be able to find the platform for your train. When your train arrives at the airport, there is a north and a south platform, so you need to go either to door N or door S depending on which end of the train you're sat at, so you need to look at the screens for that. And when you go out through the automatic doors into the station, there will be little yellow machines like post boxes on pillars, and you just need to post your ticket in and you'll hear it go and it will print on your ticket so that you validated it. Follow the locals, hang back a little bit, watch what somebody else does and just follow them. It's really easy, and this is validating your ticket. Some journeys there will be a security check where they will actually scan the QR code or the barcode on your ticket and check that it's you. Other times I've been at the station where nobody's checked my ticket. On your ticket it will tell you which coach you're sitting in. When you get down to the platform, there's a big long screen that tells you where along the platform you need to stand to be in the right place for your coach. The trains are very, very long, and sometimes they're 2 trains joined together. And with these trains you can't walk between the carriages, so you need to make sure that you get on the right carriage so that you get the right coach and the right seat, because you have to sit in a specific seat. It's not like a train where you just book a ticket and you just get on the train anywhere. You have to sit in an assigned seat like an aeroplane. So the way that you find your spot on the platform is, on that long display there will be a picture of a train with the coach numbers in the train, and then along the bottom is a representation of the platform which has letters on it. And if you look up along the platform you can see signs with those letters on. So you find, say you're in coach 16 and 16 is underneath or above F, then you would go and stand near the sign for F so that when the train comes in, coach 16 is the one that is in front of you. It will be a bit of a kerfuffle getting on and off because it's the airport, people have lots of bags and people get a bit impatient and there's quite a lot of pushing and shoving. But as long as you just wait, you will get on the train. It takes quite a while for the train to leave, so it won't leave without you. Another way of travelling to Disneyland Paris from the UK is via the Eurostar. Eurostar, in my opinion, looks brilliant on paper, but actually when you compare it to how easy I find flying, A, it's expensive, and B, it's a bit long-winded. It takes a bit longer. One advantage, of course, of getting the Eurostar is the luggage, that there is no weight allowance and you don't have to worry about liquids. That is a big advantage. I went in June via the Eurostar, and because they didn't have a direct train on the day I wanted to go, I went via Paris. Technically, it was fairly easy to do that. So you come into the Gare du Nord and you come up at street level. You need to find the signs for the RER and you need to go down a level below street level to where the suburban trains are. They have ticket machines there and you can buy your ticket from the Gare du Nord to Marne-la-Vallée, and that's it for you for your trip for Disneyland Paris, even though you do have to change trains in between. So when you're in the Gare du Nord, you are on the D line, and the trains that go to Marne-la-Vallée are on the A line. Now there are several branches of the A line, so you need to make sure that you get on the one that actually stops at Marne-la-Vallée. Otherwise you could end up somewhere else completely. So you get on the D train, and then the easiest thing to do is to go to the Gare de Lyon, and at the Gare de Lyon change to the A line and get the RER to Marne-la-Vallée. The RER is a suburban train line, so they do connect the suburbs of Paris to the city itself. It's not a luxury train, it's plastic seats, it's graffiti on the windows. I've not had any problems travelling on the A line out to Marne-la-Vallée. When I was on that train by myself, I wasn't really concerned at all. The one thing you do need to bear in mind is when you get to the Gare du Nord, there are lots of scammers trying to help people with their tickets at the ticket machines. So if you get someone that's harassing you at the ticket machine, just walk away. There will be ticket booths where you can buy a ticket in person, so if there is someone that's bothering you, I would do that instead. Ticket machines are really easy, they are in English, or you can change them to be in English, so once you've done that, it's really easy to buy your ticket for the RER. The RER will stop in the same station as the TGV. You will just come out to the side rather than in through the main entrance. I briefly mentioned the direct Eurostar, so you can go from St Pancras to Disneyland Paris direct, but they only run on certain days. Off-peak, that's about 4 days a week. During the summer holidays it will be 5 days a week, so it's still not every day of the week. My main issue with the direct Eurostar is that you arrive in the late afternoon. So if you want to maximise your park time and your days, it's not really an efficient way to go, because you're not going to get to the park until later on in the day when you've missed a massive amount of park hours. My main reason for not travelling via direct Eurostar is because of the timings, and also it is quite expensive. Doesn't mean to say that for some people it isn't the perfect way to travel, because if you've got lots of luggage or kids, then it's brilliant, because you just turn up at St Pancras, get on the train, and then 3 hours later you're in Disneyland Paris. But for me, I like to try and be as economical as I can with my trip. The cheaper I can do my trips, the more trips I can do, so I will always go for the cheapest option. And finally, the last way that you could travel from the UK to Disneyland Paris is via the Eurostar again, but this time changing at Lille. Now Lille is slightly closer to England than Paris is, so the journey across on the Eurostar is actually shorter than it is when you travel into Paris, and then you have to change at Lille to get the TGV. You need to bear in mind that in Lille there are 2 train stations. You have Lille Europe, which is where the Eurostar will come in and go out, and then you have Lille Flanders. Both have onward TGV connections which will stop at Disneyland Paris. So you need to make sure that you check when you book your Eurostar, if you're going via Lille, that you know which station your onward connection is going to be, because you don't want to be sat in Lille Europe and then realise that actually you need to be in Lille Flanders. The 2 stations are next to each other, they are fairly close together, it's not like they're over the other side of town, but you will need to allow time to get from one station to the other. If you book on the Eurostar website directly, they will give you the TGV time that is going to allow you that connection time. So they won't just put you on the next train as soon as your Eurostar comes in, because they will have factored in that transfer time between the 2 stations. Another thing that you need to bear in mind is that on your return journey, you are going to need to go through passport control in Lille before you get back on the Eurostar. And so again, if you're booking your bits separately, you need to take into account the fact that you are going to need that extra time between getting off the TGV and getting onto the Eurostar. Again, if you've booked it through Eurostar, they will have given you a TGV time that will give you enough time to get back through passport control to get onto your Eurostar. So there you go. That is pretty much my summary of different ways to travel to Disneyland Paris. I hope I've covered everything that you would expect to be covered in a travel video. If you have travelled another way, let me know. I'll be interested to find out, and let me know which way you prefer. I know that different people have different preferences around how they travel. Me personally, flying I will do as long as it's cheaper, because it's just so much quicker. But as I said, this is just based on what I found when I've been travelling to Disneyland Paris and the different ways that I have gone. So I'd be interested to see which way you prefer travelling. If you've done more than one way, let me know which way you think is best. If you've had any issues or if you've got any questions, then let me know in the comments below.